Hi, I'm going to read the final chapter of our story, Oliver Moon and the Dragon Disaster. Oliver could hardly bear to watch as the purple serpents swarmed quickly across the stage. My babies, they're getting away! Quicksilver screeched, her pointy hat falling off her head as she was jigged up and down. Whose is this dragon? Who is to blame for this? Her eyes fell upon Oliver, who was trying to drag Dotty away from the stage. She's mine, he confessed. Sorry, she's... Oh, no, you silly little wizard. She spat at him. My serpents are going everywhere. It was true. One serpent had slithered its way to the top of the stage curtains, where it dangled like a long purple rope. One serpent was sliding excitedly into the crowd. People were backing away and screaming as it flicked its little black tongue out at them. One serpent was even, oh no, one serpent was wrapping itself around Mabel's shoulders as she tried to lead the team through the parade. Get off me, you overgrown worm, she shouted, peeling it off herself and flicking it down to the ground. Ouch, it bit me, came a voice from Wizard Snivel's cauldron as a costume cockroach came clambering out. A fourth sea serpent was firmly attached to the cockroach's bottom, clinging on by its fangs. Bully's yellow eyes looked frightened through his mask as he wrestled the serpent off himself. Fancy being scared of a little snake, Hattie said loudly, popping her head out of the cauldron and winking at Oliver. Oliver nearly smiled back, but he didn't dare, with Quicksilver still glaring at him. My focus, my creative energy, my preparation shattered, she wailed, waving her wand and chanting a spell to the serpents. Now get that dragon away from me, she shouted. Oliver picked up Dotty and tucked her under one arm. Sorry, he mumbled Quicksilver. Then he glared at Dotty. Come on, he muttered through gritted teeth. The parade is nearly over. Try to behave yourself for the last bit, please. Oliver had never felt more relieved when the parade was at an end. His pointy hat was absolutely stuffed with paper stars. His wand drooped wearily where it had put so many of Dotty's fires out with drenching spells. Dotty seemed tired too. She didn't start a single fire as Oliver went to join his family for the magical performances. Hopefully she'll fall asleep, Oliver thought to himself as he curled up on the ground next to him. She couldn't cause any trouble if she was asleep. The show began and Oliver finally felt himself relaxed. Wizard Wormhead was wonderful. He turned himself into a rocket and flew up into space, then returned with a moon rock 2 minutes later. The great Gornido was, well, great. She turned her cat into a black dinosaur that took up the whole of the stage. Everybody gasped and the dinosaur picked up and looked set to gobble her up. But the witch calmly waved her wand. With a flash of violet-coloured sparks, the dinosaur turned back into a cat. Quicksilver seemed a little flustered, unfortunately, and her sea serpents would not do a thing she commanded them to do. That was your fault, Oliver, hissed at Dotty, who blinked sleepily. And next a voice boomed over the tannoy. Flying in to make a special appearance at this year's festival is the one and only Elliot Enchantrum. The crowd cheered with excitement as high up in the sky a red dot became visible. Slowly, the dot became larger and larger and larger until the watching wizards and witches realized that Elliot Enchantrum was indeed flying in on a huge red dragon. The red dragon's wings beat powerfully through the air. There was Elliot Enchantrum on its back, waving at the crowd as his dragon swooped lower, and there was... Oliver blinked and stared and looked down at the space next to him, where Dotty had been lying. Oh no! There in the sky, roaring with great excitement, was Dotty, flying towards the red dragon as fast as she could. So much for her falling asleep and staying out of trouble. Oliver could hardly bear to watch. The dragons were sure to collide, and Elliot Enchantrum would fall off and injure himself, and there would be the most huge fuss, and it would all be his fault. His eyes closed. Oliver suddenly heard the crowd gasp and then start clapping. He opened his eyes a little bit to see Dotty flying gracefully behind the red dragon in a beautiful display. Ooh, the crowd chorused as the dragons looped the loops 6 times in a row. Wow, they breathed as the dragons flew smoothly backwards together. Hooray, they cheered as the dragons zigzagged through the crowds. Bravo, they bellowed, clapping their hands and stamping their feet as both dragons landed on the main stage. Elliot Enchantrum leaped off the red dragon's back and went towards Dotty, who gazed lovingly at him, then blew a smoke ring in the shape of a heart. Ah, the audience sighed. Even Oliver. He'd never seen Dotty look so happy. Elliot threw his arms around Dotty's. Doris, you're safe. We've been worried about you, he cried. Oliver's family stared at one another. Doris? Elliot beamed at the audience. Doris is the daughter of Daphne and here, he said, patting the nose of the big red dragon. And unfortunately for us, Doris wandered off and got lost when we were staying at Cacklewick the other week. We've been searching everywhere for her. I can't believe we found her. Oliver's mouth hung open in surprise. To think that Dotty was really Elliot Chancellor's dragon. Dotty stayed on stage with the red dragon for the whole performance. She was as good as gold. She even helped with some of the spells. Why couldn't she be like that for us? Mr. Moon complained in a whisper. Bless her, Mrs. Moon clucked, watching as Dotty trotted along the stage after the red dragon. She was just missing her mummy. At the end of the show, Elliot hugged both dragons. I'd like to thank Cacklewick Council for asking me to this festival's magic this year, he said. A huge cheer went up. And I'd also like to thank whoever was looking after Doris for me while she was lost, he went on. She's clearly been looked after very well. It was us, Oliver shouted, waving her hand. Our pleasure, Mrs. Moon said, beaming. Mr. Moon stared at her as if she was mad. Our pleasure, he echoed in a disbelieving mutter. That's not what I would call it. Thank you, Elliot called out to the Moons, and a handful of free tickets to our next show appeared in Oliver's hand in a flurry of magical sparkles. Then Elliot waved to the audience. Goodbye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the festival. And the dragons flew up into the sky again, with Elliot on the red dragon's back. Bye-bye, the witch baby said, waving a fat hand at the sky. Oliver smiled in delight as he took the tickets into his cloak. What a result! The rest of the festival was fantastic. The Raven Ravens were awesome, and was the Black Arrows display. Everyone had a wonderful time. It's time to go home, said Mrs. Moon. The last act has finished. Oliver and his family drifted through the festival grounds, past the stalls and sideshows, which were all closing up. The witch baby suddenly broke free from Mrs. Moon's hand and toddled off to one of the stalls. Want that? She shrieked urgently. Want that? Oliver looked to see what his sister had spotted and groaned. She was standing in front of a magical pet stall, pointing at a very grumpy-looking griffin. Want that? The baby witch repeated. Want it? Mr. Moon shuddered. No chance, he said firmly. One pet disaster is enough for this family. Thank you very much. Oliver put his arm round his sister. Come on, he said. If you're really good, I'll get you one of those hairy spiders for Christmas instead. The witch baby gave Oliver a kiss on the cheek. Nice, Ollie, she said. Ta. You're welcome, Oliver said, steering her well away from the griffin. Let's go home now. And they did. I hope you've enjoyed that story. Take care. Bye.